Good morning. This Doc Tom talk is going to take place on the 7th of July, early Sunday morning in the current era, 2024. Um, my subject that I'm going to talk about this morning is the United Nations. I have probably mentioned this before in another Tom Talk, but I think it's critically important that humanity understands what the United Nations represents and how important it is, uh, and how important it is to change for the better, to be a more effective organization. Uh, the United Nations was formed after World War II, uh, as it became obvious to the leaders of the countries of the entire planet that annihilation through war was possible. World War II had caused massive devastation and human suffering for millions of people. And because of what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it was obvious that war now threatened the very existence of humanity. So it was formed in an effort to um, save the world from, or the humanity from destruction, which of course is an important goal. Uh, the problem was that the egotistical nature of leadership, of the leaders of the countries that comprised the nations of the planet, um, made it such that there were built-in uh, fail-safes that protected their power and leadership. The main one being the Security Council, which was formed of seven nations that had permanent seats, and any resolution passed by the United Nations and the Security Council uh, required the ratification of all seven nations. Any nation uh, could veto any resolution. And this has happened over and over again throughout the history of the United Nations, and basically neutered or took away the most important power that the United Nations might yield, or wield, excuse me. Um, the United Nations has morphed into something that has many different duties, which I think are important duties, but are not the main function of what the United Nations was designed to do or to be. The main function was to prevent catastrophic armed conflicts. Um, the only way that I can imagine that this can be done is for the United Nations to be powerful enough to challenge any particular nation that might be an aggressor in a way that prevents that aggression. Um, this requires that the United Nations have the full support, military support of the nations of the planet. Uh, the way that this can be accomplished is for the United Nations, all of the nations of the planet, to, at a particular point in time, let's just say today, define the international borders of the various sovereign nations of the planet as permanent and immutable, unless the people of those various nations decide, for instance, to democratically join with another nation and make a new single sovereign nation. An example of this might be Latvia and Estonia and Lithuania deciding to become Baltica or something of that nature, but it would have to be done by the free will of the people of those nations, which doesn't seem probable, but certainly seems possible. But then what would happen would be that the rules of the planet would be that no military force or no military equipment could cross international boundaries. In other words, no organized military from one nation would be allowed to cross into another nation for any purpose. A United Nations peacekeeping force might be deployed into a nation to help resolve a local conflict within that nation, but no sovereign nation or group of sovereign nations outside of the United Nations itself would be allowed to have armies or military personnel cross the international boundaries separating sovereign nations, and no nation would be able to provide military equipment to another sovereign nation. And any movement of troops across an international border or any movement of military equipment across an international border would be considered an act of aggression against all of the nations of the planet. Therefore, war would become outlawed by the decision made by the United Nations of the planet. Therefore, the sovereignty of each nation would be sacrosanct. A nation could decide to be a theocracy or an autocracy or an oligarchy or a democracy, and the nation itself would make that decision based on whatever happened inside that nation, whether it was through civil war or democratic processes. The other nations of the planet would be allowed to sit on the sidelines and comment and cheer one side or the other on, support one faction or another faction, even financially, but not militarily. This would prohibit war and make the possession and development and use of nuclear weapons unnecessary and even illegal, as nuclear weapons would never be reasonably used in a civil conflict within the borders of a sovereign nation. They have their purpose is only for military use across international boundaries, and used by one nation, one sovereign nation against another. This should be the sole purpose of the United Nations, and the Security Council should be perhaps continued, perhaps expanded, but it should be a 2/3 or maybe even 3/4 majority of the nations making decisions concerning the rules that limit armed conflict. And if this could be accomplished, we could eliminate the potential for world war and eliminate the potential for international conflict, allowing the peoples within the borders of each sovereign nation to determine their own fate. Thank you for listening. Let's get her done.